Commissary Minfroid, whom, nothing surprised, was stooping over that big body. "No," he said, "he is dead drunk," which is not quite the same thing. "It's the first time, if so," said the stage manager. "Then someone has given him a narcotic." "That is quite possible." Minfroid went down a few steps and said, "Look!" By the light of a little red lantern at the foot of the stairs, they saw two other bodies. The stage manager recognized Montclair's assistant. Minfroid went down and listened to their breathing. "They are sound asleep," he said. "Very curious business. Some person unknown must have interfered with the gas man and his staff. And that person unknown was obviously working on behalf of the kidnapper. But what a funny idea to kidnap a performer on the stage. "Send for the doctor of the theater, please," said Minfroid. And Minfroid repeated, "Curious. Decidedly curious business." Then he turned to the little room, addressing the people whom Raoul and the Persian were unable to see from where they lay. "What do you say to all this, gentlemen? You are the only ones who have not given your views, and yet you must have an opinion of some sort." Thereupon Raoul and the Persian saw the startled faces of the joint managers appear above the landing, and they heard Moncharming's excited voice. "There are things happening here, Mr. Commissary, which are unable to explain." The two faces disappeared. It's a good thing I'm almost done this book, because I don't think this mask will hold up for very much longer. "Thank you for the information, gentlemen," said Minfroid with a jeer. But the stage manager, folding his chin in the hollow of his right hand, which is the attitude of profound thought, said, "It is not the first time that Moncharmin has fallen asleep in the theater. I remember finding him one evening snoring in his little recess, with his snuff-box beside him." "Is that long ago?" asked Monsieur Minfroid, carefully wiping his eyeglasses. "No, not so very long ago." "Wait a bit! It was the night—" "Of course, yes! It was the night when Carlotta, you know, Mr. Commissary, gave her famous croak." "Really? The night when Carlotta gave her famous croak?" And Monsieur Minfroid, replacing his gleaming glasses on his nose, fixed the stage manager with a contemplative stare. "So Montclair takes snuff, does he?" he asked carelessly. "Yes, Mr. Commissary. Look, there is his snuff-box on that little shelf. Oh, he's a great snuff-taker." "So am I," said Minfroid, and put the snuff-box in his pocket. Raoul and the Persians themselves watched the removal of the three bodies by a number of scene-shifters, who were followed by the commissary and all the people with him. Their steps were heard for a few minutes on the stage above. When they were alone, the Persian made a sign to Raoul to stand up. Raoul did so, but as he did not lift his hand in front of his eyes, ready to fire, the Persian told him to resume the Persian told him to resume that attitude and continue it, whatever happened. But it tires the hand unnecessarily, whispered Raoul. If I do fire, I shan't be sure of my aim. Then shift your pistol to the other hand, said the Persian. I can't shoot with my left hand. Thereupon the Persian made a queer reply, which was certainly not calculated to throw light into the young man's furrowed brain. It's not a question of shooting with the right hand or the left. It's a question of holding one of your hands as though you were going to pull the trigger of a pistol with your arm bent. As for the pistol itself, when all is said, you can put that in your pocket. And he added, let this be clearly understood, and I will answer for nothing. It is a matter of life and death. And now, silence, and follow me. The cellars of the opera were enormous, and they are 5 in number. Raoul followed the Persian and wondered what he would have done without his companion in that extraordinary labyrinth. They went down to the 3rd cellar, and their progress was still lit by some distant lamp. The lower they went, the more precautious the Persian seemed to take. He kept on turning to Raoul to see if he was holding his arm properly, showing him how he himself carried his hand as how he himself carried his hand, as if always ready to fire, though the pistol was in his pocket. Suddenly a loud voice made them stop. Somehow above them shouted, all the door shutters on stage! The commissary of police wants them! Steps were heard, and shadows glided through the darkness. The Persian drew Raoul behind a set-piece. They saw passing before and above them old men bent by age and the past burden of opera scenery. Some could hardly drag themselves along. Others, from habit, with stooping bodies and outstretched hands, looked for the door to shut. They were the door shutters, the old worn-out scene-shifters, on whom a charitable management had taken pity, giving them the job of shutting doors above and below the stage. They went about incessantly from top to bottom of the building, shutting the doors, and they were also called the draft expellers, at least at that time, for I have little doubt that by now they are all dead. Drafts are very bad for the voice, wherever they may come from. The Persia and Rao welcomed this incident, which relieved them of inconvenient witness, for some of those door shutters have nothing else to do or nowhere to lay their heads, stayed at the opera. The idleness or necessity, and spent the night there. The two men might have stumbled over them, waking them up and providing a request of explanations. For the moment, Monsieur Monfroid inquiry saved them from any such unpleasant encounters. But they were not left to enjoy their solitude for long. Other shades now came down by the same way by which the door shutters had gone up. Each of these shades carried a little lantern and moved it about, above, below, and all around, as though looking for something or somebody. "Hang it!" muttered the Persian. "I don't know what they are looking for, but they might easily find us. Let us get away, quick. Your hand up, sir. Ready to fire. Bend your arm. More. That's it. Hand at the level of your eyes, as though you were fighting a duel and waiting for the word to fire. Oh, leave your pistol in your pocket, quick. Come along downstairs. Level of your eye. Question of life or death. Here, this way. These stairs." They reached the fifth cellar. Oh, what a duel! Sir, what a duel! Once in the fifth cellar, the Persia drew breath. He seemed to enjoy a rather greater sense of security than he had displayed when they both stopped in the third, but he never altered the attitude of his hand. And Rao, remembering the Persian's observation, "I know these pistols can be relied upon," was more and more astonished, wondering why anyone should be so grateful at being able to rely upon a pistol which he did not intend to use. But the Persian left him no time for reflection. Telling Rao to stay where he was, he ran up a few steps of the staircase, which they had just left, and then turned, and then returned. "How stupid of us," he whispered. "We shall soon have seen the end of those men with their lanterns. It is the firemen going their rounds." In those days, it was still part of the firemen's duty to watch over the safety of the opera house outside of the performances, but this service has since been suppressed. I asked Monsieur Pedro Gallard the reason, and he replied, it was because the management was afraid that in their utter inexperience, the cellars of the opera, the firemen might set fire to the building. The things you find out reading the footnotes. I should have read that other one. Oh well. Oh, there's a big one here. Okay, definitely reading the footnotes from here on out. Okay. The two men waited 5 minutes longer. Then the Persian took Rao up the stairs, but suddenly he stopped with a gesture. Something moved in the darkness before them. "Flat your stomach! Flat on your stomach!" whispered the Persian. The two men lay flat on the floor. They were only just in time. A shade this time carrying no light, just a shade in the shade, passed. It passed close to them, near enough to touch them. They felt the warmth of its cloak upon them, for they could distinguish the shade significantly, to see that it wore a cloak which shrouded it from head to foot. On its head it had a soft felt hat. It moved away, drawing its feet against the walls, and sometimes having a kick into the corner. "Phew," said the Persian. "We've had a narrow escape. That shade knows me, and has twice taken me to the manager's office." Is it someone belonging to the theater police?" asked Rao. "It's someone much worse than that," replied the Persian, without giving any further explanation. Like the Persian, I can give no further explanation touching the apparition of this shade. Whereas in this historic narrative, everything else will be normally explained. However abnormal the course of events may seem, I cannot give the reader expressly to understand what the Persian meant by the words. It is something much worse than that. The reader must try to guess for himself, for I promised Monsieur Pedro Gallard, the former manager of the Opera House, to keep his secret regarding the extremely interesting and useful personality of the wandering cloak shade, which, while condemning itself to live in the cellars of the opera, rendered such immense services to those who, on the gala evenings, for instance, venture to stray away from the stage. I am speaking of stage services, and upon my word of honor, I cannot say more. It's not he. He? If he does not come behind us, we shall always see his yellow eyes. That is more or less our safeguard tonight. But he may come from behind, steal up, and we are dead men if we do not keep our hands as though about to fire at the level of our eyes in front. The Persian had hardly finished speaking when a fantastic face came in sight. A whole fiery face, not only 2 yellow eyes. Yes, a head of fire came towards them, at a man's height, but with no body attached to it. The face shed fire, looking in the darkness like a flame shaped as a man's face. "Oh!" said the Persian between his teeth. "I have never seen this before." Pambid was not mad after all. He had seen it. What can that flame be? It is not he, but he may have seen it. Take care, take care. Your hand at the level of your eyes. In heaven's name, at the level of your eyes. I know most of his tricks, but not this one. Come, let us run. It is safer. Hand at the level of your eyes. And they fled down the long passage that opened before them. After a few seconds that seemed to them like long minutes, they stopped. He doesn't often come this way," said the Persian. "This side has nothing to do with him. This side does not lead to the lake nor to the house on the lake. But perhaps he knows that we are at his heels, although I promised him to leave him alone and never to meddle in his business again. So saying, he turned his head, and Raoul also turned his head, and they again saw the head of fire behind their two heads. It had followed them, and it must have run also, and perhaps faster than they, for it seemed to be nearer to them. At the same time, they began to perceive a certain noise, of which they could not guess the nature. They simply noticed that the sound seemed to move and to approach with the fiery face. It was a noise as though thousands of nails had been scraped against a blackboard, and perfectly undurable noise that is sometimes made by a little stone inside the chalk that grates on the blackboard. They continued to retreat but the fiery face came on, gaining on them. They could see its features clearly now. The eyes were round and staring, the nose a little crooked, and the mouth large, with a hanging lower lip, very, very like the eyes, nose, and lip of the moon, when the moon is quite red, bright red. How did that red moon manage to glide through the darkness at a man's height, with nothing to support it, at least apparently? And how did it go so fast, so straight ahead, with such staring eyes? And what was that scratching, scraping, grating sound which it brought with it? The Persian and Raoul could retreat no farther and flattened themselves against the wall, not knowing what was going to happen because of the incomprehensible head of fire, and especially now because of the more intense, swarming, living, numerous sound. For the sound was certainly made up of hundreds of little sounds that moved in the darkness under the fiery face. And the fiery face came on, with its noise, came level with them. And the two companions, flat against their wall, felt their hair stand on end with horror. For they now knew what the thousand noises meant. They came in a troop, hustled along in the shadow by innumerable little hurried waves, swifter than the waves that rush over the sands at high tide. Little night waves foaming under the moon, under the fiery head that was like the moon, and the little waves passing between their legs, climbing up their legs irresistibly, and Raoul and the Persian could no longer restrain their cries of horror, dismay, and pain, nor could they continue to hold their hands at the level of their eyes. Their hands went down to their legs to push back the waves, which were full of little legs and nails and claws and teeth. Yes, Raoul and the Persian were ready to faint. Pompin, the fireman. But the head of fire turned around to answer to their cries and spoke to them. "Don't move! Don't move! Whatever you do, don't come after me. I am a rat catcher. Let me pass with my rats." and the head of fire disappeared, vanishing in the darkness, while the passage in front of it lit up. As the result of the change which the rat catcher had made in his dark lantern before, so as not to scare the rats in front of him, he had turned his dark lantern on himself, lighting up his own head. Now, to hasten their flight, he lit the dark space in front of him, and he jumped along, dragging with him the waves of scratching rats, all the thousand sounds. Ral and the Persian, breathing again, though still trembling. I ought to have remembered that Eric talked to me about the rat catcher, said the Persian, but he never told me that he looked like that. And it's funny that I should never have met him before. Of course, Eric never comes to this part. Are we very far from the lake, sir? Asked Ral. When shall we be there? Take me to the lake. Oh, take me to the lake. When we are at the lake, we will call out. Christine will hear us. And he will hear us too. And as you know him, we shall talk to him. Baby, said the Persian, we shall never enter the house on the lake, by the lake. I myself have never landed on the other bank, the bank on which the house stands. You have to cross the lake first, and it is well guarded. I fear that more than one of those men, old scene shifters, old door shutters, who have never been seen again, were simply tempted to cross the lake. It is terrible. I myself would have been nearly killed there if the monster had not recognized me in time. One piece of advice, sir. Never go near the lake. And above all, shut your ears if you hear the voice singing under the water, the siren's voice. But then, what are we here for? Asked Ral in a transport of fever, impatience, and a rage. If you can do nothing for Christine, at least let me die for her. The Persian tried to calm the young man. We have only one means of saving Christine Daae, believe me, which is to enter the house unperceived by the monster. And is there any hope of that, sir? If I had not that hope, I would not have come to fetch you. And how can one enter the house on the lake without crossing the lake? From the third cellar, from which we were so unluckily driven away. We will go back there now. I will tell you, said the Persian, with a sudden change in his voice. I will tell you the exact place. So, it is between a set piece and discarded scene from Le Roi de Lahore, exactly at the spot where Joseph Buett died.